On June 10, 2015, Gypsy Rose Blanchard texted her boyfriend, "It's go time. Are you ready?" Her online boyfriend, Nick Godejohn, takes a taxi to her house in Springfield, Missouri. He knows there will be a knife waiting there for him, and that his next actions will determine his new life with his girlfriend. This is the extremely dark story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born to parents Claudine and Rod Blanchard on July 27, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. Claudine P. Trey Blanchard, also known as Dee Dee, was 24 years old, and Rod Blanchard was only 17 years old when they met and began a romantic relationship. Dee Dee became pregnant, and Rod decided the right thing to do was to marry her. However, right before his 18th birthday and right before Gypsy was born, Rod decided that he was not actually in love with Dee Dee, so they separated. Gypsy Rose was given her unique name by her mother, who liked the name Gypsy. The Rose part came from her father. He was a big fan of Guns N' Roses. When doing my research for this video, I became aware of a Broadway musical called Gypsy. In the musical, the main character is a stripper with the name Gypsy Rose Lee. The musical follows the character's life and adversity with her stage mother. Gypsy was a healthy baby girl at birth. When little Gypsy was 3 months old, Dee Dee became concerned that she had sleep apnea. She took Gypsy to the hospital, but doctors were unable to confirm a diagnosis. But this did not sway Dee Dee. She did her best to convince Rod that Gypsy actually had a chromosomal defect. According to Dee Dee, it was this underlying health condition that was the cause for the sleep apnea. And as time went on, it was also the cause for the increasing number of other health issues that Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had. Dee Dee was always coming up with new problems that Gypsy had. She had previously worked as a nurse's aide. This exposure to medical terminology and health ailments seemed to grant Dee Dee with just enough credibility for her persuasions that Gypsy was in fact a very sick little girl. Gypsy began seeing doctors for serious ailments like seizures, leukemia, and muscular dystrophy. Dee Dee had Gypsy's head shaved. She said it was to prepare for when her hair fell out due to the medication. But it also made Gypsy appear to others as a chemotherapy patient. Her medications also caused her teeth to rot and require extraction. Rod Blanchard eventually married again to a woman named Christy and had 2 more children. He continued to have a relationship with his daughter Gypsy until about 2005. Family members recall a young Gypsy playing as a typical able-bodied child at their home, walking, running, jumping, and playing. There was a minor accident that occurred when Gypsy was riding on her grandfather's motorcycle. Following this, Dee Dee took her to the hospital. She claimed that doctors gave her a wheelchair for Gypsy to use. This seemed like a bit much, considering Gypsy had only suffered a scrape to the knee during the motorcycle accident. However, even before this event, Gypsy was using a walker. Dee Dee had insisted that she do so, due to the deterioration of her muscles from muscular dystrophy. In late August 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated parts of Louisiana. Dee Dee and Gypsy were evacuated to a shelter. Unfortunately, their house and all their belongings were destroyed. Dee Dee claimed that important documents like Gypsy's birth certificate and medical records were lost. At the shelter, they would capture the heart of Dr. Janet Jordan. a doctor from the Ozarks who had come to lend a hand to the victims of Hurricane Katrina. So captivated by Dee Dee and Gypsy and their story of struggle, Dr. Jordan convinced them to move to Missouri and even arranged for a helicopter to take them there. It was a feel-good story that you'd expect to hear as the local news fills their time.
It's beautiful, and it's happy, and it's full of love.
In 2008, they made a move to Springfield, Missouri, settling in a home on the 2100 block of West Volunteer Way. This residence, built by Habitat for Humanity, became their new home.
We have an awesome bathtub. It's a jacuzzi tub meant for my muscles, and we have a wonderful ramp. I remember my mom had gave me this little glass house, and she said, one day this will be real. And now it finally is.
Their story gained nationwide attention, and the people who heard their story sent in support and well wishes to them. Prior to this type of attention, in Louisiana, Dee Dee and Gypsy mainly took advantage of staying at Ronald McDonald houses. These were charity homes, available to families who needed to be close by the hospital while their child was being seen by a specialist. But after the move to the Habitat for Humanity house, they experienced a new level of fame. The poor, sick, sweet, endearing daughter and her inspiring mother made such an impact. The duo had been given free trips to Disney World and backstage passes to a Miranda Lambert concert provided through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Disney and sci-fi conventions were also a favorite of Gypsy's. She loved to dress up as princesses or in sci-fi cosplay. She said it made her feel included even though she was in a wheelchair. Dee Dee and Gypsy were able to capitalize from the fans at these conventions as well. Super fans who met Gypsy were so enchanted by her gravely ill presentation and the upbeat personality that she maintained that they gladly accepted her into their ranks, going so far as to even present her with honorary memberships into their groups. And one amazingly talented fan created custom handmade Mandalorian armor for Gypsy, all for free, of course. After the move, even though Rod Blanchard kept sending money for Gypsy's support, he had a difficult time seeing her. Every time he tried to make plans, there was always an excuse or reason to delay. And when he did finally get to talk to Gypsy on the phone, Dee Dee intercepted him first, always making sure to remind him of Gypsy's developmental delays, and that Gypsy thinks she's actually several years younger than her real age. But Gypsy knew she could walk, and at some point she determined that she was not as sickly as her mother led everyone to believe. In an HBO documentary, Gypsy recalled that Dee Dee not only used mental abuse, but physical abuse as well, to keep her compliant. She alleged that Dee Dee would hold Gypsy's hand while they had guests over at the house, and would squeeze it tightly if Gypsy seemed to be going off course with her conversation. Gypsy also said that Dee Dee would strike her with her hand, or objects like a coat hanger. However, this ruling with an iron fist and total control would begin to backfire on Dee Dee, because not only did Gypsy at some point become wise to the idea that she was not sick, she was also certain that her mother was lying about her age. There's differing stories about how she came to realize this. Some accounts have this as her accidentally seeing birth certificates, with 1995 or 1991 as her birth date. In a recent docuseries, Gypsy reveals that in 2011 she discovered her Medicaid card as listing her actual birth date, and that she was actually 19, not 15. It was this same year that she was having a romantic relationship with a man she met at a sci-fi convention. They remained in touch after the convention and the friendship became romantic. The man, named Dan Glidewell, was 36 years old at the time. It is assumed that as Gypsy and her mother were telling everyone that she was 15 at the time, he was aware that she was what he thought a minor. The details of the story are fuzzy, as there have been different versions given by Gypsy and those with knowledge of the situation. However, here are some details of this event. One version is that after discovering the Medicaid cards, Gypsy confides to Dan that she's actually 19. He encourages her to leave since she is actually an adult, so she takes off to be with him in Arkansas. Oddly, she left her cell phone at home, with Dan's address still open. In addition, she left a note stating that she had run away to be an independent woman. The second version is that folks at the sci-fi convention were concerned about the relationship between the much older Dan and the 15-year-old Gypsy. They found Gypsy in his hotel room at the convention, and Dee Dee produced a birth certificate with the later date to scare him into letting her go. Whatever the actual story is, or some combination that happened, later on Dan gave his testimony that he was in a romantic relationship with Gypsy during that time. The outcome also remains the same, that after Dee Dee hauled Gypsy home, she smashed Gypsy's phone and laptop, and then bound her to the bed for 2 weeks. Dee Dee also bought a gun. After she was eventually freed from her bed, Gypsy made another attempt to run away. When Dee Dee found her packed bag, Gypsy said she grabbed the gun and fired it as many times as she could at her mother, only to find out it was actually just a BB gun. Dee Dee used this incident to garner more sympathy on Facebook, claiming that she had been shot by a robber in a Walmart parking lot. In 2012, Gypsy continued to spend time online, especially after Dee Dee went to bed. There, she met Nicholas Godejohn on a Christian dating website. Nick was a very lonely young man, and he was diagnosed with autism in grade school. After graduating high school, he made some attempts to become a computer repairman or to get into computer programming, but those things didn't work out. He remained isolated at home with his mother and stepfather in Big Bend, Wisconsin. But he did find social connections online, especially with Gypsy. Aaliyah Woodmansee was a neighbor of Dee Dee and Gypsy's. She was a little older than Gypsy, and they used to have playdates together since they grew up in the same Habitat for Humanity neighborhood. In 2014, Gypsy contacted Aaliyah through one of her several secret Facebook accounts. She confided in Aaliyah about Nick. She knew her mom would be angry with her, and she felt like her mom didn't want her to grow up or date anyone. She told Aaliyah that she and Nick were in love and were keeping it a secret from Dee Dee. Gypsy and Nick had been together for 2 years by that point. They planned to get married and have children together. Once Gypsy confided in Aaliyah about Nick, Aaliyah said she never heard from her again. To finally introduce Nick to Dee Dee, Gypsy and Nick devised a plan to have her and Dee Dee casually happen upon him in a movie theater. In March 2015, she sent money to Nick so that he could make the trip to the movie theater in Springfield, Missouri. The movie playing was Cinderella, and Gypsy was dressed as Cinderella and Nick was dressed as Prince Charming. While the movie was playing, Gypsy and Nick both left the theater and met up in the men's restroom. The two were intimate for the first time in the handicap stall there. After this rendezvous, Gypsy and Nick continued their relationship online, and they grew even closer. Nick confided in Gypsy that he had an evil side named Victor. The evil side was interested in intense and dark sexual fantasies. And as it would happen, Gypsy introduced Nick to her own evil side. Her name was Ruby. And in May 2015, it was the sharing of these fantasies and dark sides that led to developing a plan to murder Dee Dee Blanchard. On June 9, 2015, Gypsy again sent money to Nick to make the bus trip from Big Bend, Wisconsin to Springfield, Missouri. He arrived while Gypsy and Dee Dee were at the ER, taking care of Gypsy's unnecessary feeding tube. After arriving home, Dee Dee went to sleep, and Gypsy gave Nick the signal to enter the home. Allegedly, she gave him duct tape, gloves, and a knife to murder her mother. Gypsy waited in the bathroom as Nick entered Dee Dee's bedroom. He stabbed her in the back 17 times. Gypsy and Nick returned to Gypsy's bedroom and were intimate directly after the murder. Nick said the intimacy was consensual. Gypsy later told police that it was not. Gypsy claimed that he raped her because she refused to let him rape her mother's body after the murder. She also claimed that she called out for help from Dee Dee. Gypsy and Nick took over $4,000 cash from a safe and took off to a motel just outside of Springfield. During that time, they were seen on several security cameras. Gypsy obviously walking normally because she always could. Nick and Gypsy mailed the knife to Nick's home in Wisconsin to avoid being caught in transit with it. They then took a bus together to Nick's home. On June 14, 2015, a disturbing Facebook update was posted to Dee Dee and Gypsy's joint account. Just as neighbors and friends began to react to the post, another one came. People began attempts to contact Dee Dee and Gypsy, obviously fearing for the worst. When police entered their home, they found Dee Dee deceased on her bed. It was clear she had been brutally murdered, and Gypsy was nowhere to be found. Aaliyah Woodmansee was among the crowd of onlookers as police were investigating the Blanchard home. She made her way over to police and told them everything she knew about Gypsy's secret online boyfriend, and she showed them the messages that Gypsy had sent her. Police were also able to trace the IP address of the Facebook post to a home in Big Bend, Wisconsin, the home where Nick and Gypsy were staying. On June 15, 2015, police raided the residence and arrested both Nicholas Godejohn and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. On July 5, 2016, Gypsy pleaded guilty to her mother's murder. Due to the new details of the abuse of Gypsy by her mother and her being a victim of Munchausen by proxy, she was able to plead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. In November 2018, Nicholas Godejohn's trial was held. Gypsy gave her testimony that she did in fact plan her mother's murder. She said it was the only way out of her life of abuse. Nicholas Godejohn's attorneys argued that, while he did in fact murder Dee Dee Blanchard, he was actually manipulated by Gypsy into doing it. He was described as low-functioning, with autism and low IQ, a person who could be easily coerced into something, especially since he deeply cared for Gypsy and wanted to save her from her awful situation. They argued for his charges to also be reduced to second-degree murder. On November 16, 2018, Nicholas Godejohn was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. In April 2019, a family friend revealed to the media that while in prison, Gypsy became engaged to a pen pal. They had been writing to each other for over a year and a half. They did at one point break up and then reignite their romance. But at that point, they had planned to get married in January 2020. However, the Springfield New Leader would report that in June 2022, Gypsy married a different man named Ryan Scott Anderson. He works as a middle school special education teacher in Louisiana. On December 28, 2023, Gypsy was released from prison. In total, she served 8 years, and although this was not the 10 years she was sentenced to, her good behavior and her time spent in jail awaiting trial fulfilled her requirement, and she shared her first selfie of freedom immediately after her release. In late March 2024, just 3 months after her release from prison, Gypsy announced her separation from Ryan Anderson. She has since moved in with her father and stepmother. Nick Godejohn was interviewed in 2019, saying that he regrets killing Dee Dee Blanchard.
I would have probably ran away with Gypsy, is the obvious one. So definitely would have done that, because I don't want to be stained with a murder on my hands. I don't want to be stained with that, being labeled as a killer. I don't want to be stained with that, but I'll live with it. I probably would have attempted to try to get her to prolong it to a longer date, to maybe try to go a different route rather than what we did do. Or maybe trying to get her pregnant this way her mom would be forced to let me in her life. Well, we really didn't get a chance to go to that route just because the limited time we had, there's just no way it would have been possible. So and maybe that'd be the only other minor change I would have made, is that I would have ran away with her earlier. So this way I wouldn't have had to suffer all this time away from each other, that we could have been closer together. That's probably the only two things I would have changed, really.
In August 2022, Nick, having hired new attorneys, appeared before a judge to ask that his previous conviction be set aside and to order a new trial on grounds that he had ineffective counsel in his first one. This request was denied. Rod Blanchard, Gypsy's father, claims he had no idea that his daughter wasn't the sick little girl that Dee Dee claimed her to be. He was not part of the select few who knew that Gypsy could actually walk. It's unclear as to why he didn't push for more information or more visitation with Gypsy. He did make sure to always pay for child support and gifts for Gypsy. Perhaps the many illnesses and hospital visits overwhelmed him. Maybe he felt like Dee Dee had it all under control. Nicholas Godejohn's parents were understandably horrified by what their son had done. They claimed that because of his autism that they usually kept a close eye on him.
What do you think about this?
I don't know. I mean, I know that once he started going down there, we always keep a close watch on him because he has. And that's
Has
why
he been
lives with us.
diagnosed with? Okay.
So that's why we kind of, treat him like. When he was last doctor he talked to, they said his mind is probably always going to be 15, 16, right around there.
His father postulates that perhaps Gypsy at one point had feelings for Nick, but ultimately used him to murder her mother and set her free. He hypothesizes that Gypsy learned her manipulative tactics from Dee Dee.
Gypsy was just using him. She may have had a slight feelings for him, but once she got him in, reeled him in to her plan, then she pretty much started losing interest in him until after Dee was done, and then boom, threw him under the bus. I felt compassion because of what her mother did to her, but in retrospect, what she learned all those traits from her mom and turned around and used them on my son, and